you know, we were brought up to say, right, okay, you know, the boy gets the farm, you know, the girl, if you want a farm, you've got to marry a farmer, okay? And so that's what I did. I then became the dairy farmer's wife. I became the dreaded daughter-in-law. And so I understand what it feels like to be in those positions, you know? And, you know, and how damned awkward that conversation can be. You know, I was the daughter-in-law where my sister-in-law used to boast that she'd never been in the milking parlour. So I understand, you know, how difficult these conversations can be. Well, how did I get into this? Well, my husband went off with another woman, which turned out to be, you know, a blessing in disguise, but it didn't feel like that at the time. And so I ended up having to come out to farming. And I didn't want to because I absolutely love farming. And so I ended up doing this. I went out to Australia to be trained almost 14 years ago now, and came back then to help farmers to talk through succession. So I'm not legally trained and I'm not tax trained. I know enough to be able to point people in the right direction. But what my job is to facilitate that discussion, to get the family to see through so that you go to your solicitor or you account, you have a rough idea of what everybody wants. And sadly, we don't do that very often because we're so busy doing other things. We don't sort of think, well, actually, we need to sit down and talk as a family. And the problem is, you know, and I do it as well, I've got 2 children, you know, and we all assume we know what everybody else in the family is thinking and what they want. And, you know, I've been in enough meetings now to know that usually that'll come as a big shock. And if you build a business with other people based on assumptions, then there's a chance for a high chance of conflict in the future. So it's very important to sit down and talk about what you want to happen in the future. So, succession. Now, this may come as a shock to some people, but succession will happen. None of us get out of this alive. Okay? So it will happen. So it's really important to have that discussion. So when do you start? Lots of people say to me, well, when do you start talking about succession, Jan? You know? And really, it should be as soon as you have children. We've got a little one here in the room today. As soon as you have children, you need to start talking about it and thinking about it. The children need to hear about that, you know, that conversation on the breakfast table. And I did a family meeting just over a year ago, young couple in their 30s, 3 young children under 5, God help them, but 2 young children under 5. And they wanted to have the discussion because they realised that the decisions you make in your business life need to colour what you want to happen in the future. And so we were talking about, well, right, okay, what if all 3 children want to farm? How the hell are we going to manage that? What if they don't all want to farm? Do we need to be thinking about looking at assets other than the farm to be able to give to children who are not going to be farming in the future? So that not everything is based on that one unit, and so that one child gets the whole lot, and there's nothing else for others. And so starting at a very early stage is a good idea. Okay, so let's talk about, you know, this session is supposed to be about happy families. Well, I'm going to talk about things that go wrong and what, you know, you should be doing to help that to go well. So one of the areas we need to start sitting down and talking about these things is when somebody comes back into the business. You know, you've got a young person who's gone out and gone to university or whatever. They decided they want to come back into the farm business. Now, I talk a lot to young farmers. And what I say to them is, it may be a good idea not to come straight back to the family business. It may be a good idea to go and work for to go, maybe travel, you know, go to Australia or Canada or wherever you go and work for somebody else, even work in another industry, because then you're coming back to the family farm with a wider view of it, and also you're coming back as an informed choice rather than, well, I can't think of anything else to do, I may as well go home. So it gives you a wider view of things. So that's what I sort of recommend to young people. But, you know, some people don't, and some people really don't want to. So that's fine. But let's think of all the things you need to be doing when that young person comes back into the business. You always start, when you think about these things, doing the easy things first, okay? So the first thing that you would think about is, right, okay, time. What time do we want this young person to start in the mornings? What time do we hope to finish in the evenings? I've been a dairy farmer, I know it's hope. We want to finish in the evenings. Are we working every weekend, every other weekend? Holidays, you know, are there certain times of years when you shouldn't be taking a holiday? All these things sort of clarify expectations so you're preventing problems in the future. And you know, often somebody who go and work for somebody else has this all sorted out. They come back to the family business and it's not talked through properly. So when I have a family meeting with some families, and you know, and they are having a problem with this, and they are at the stage of the young people coming back, we say, right, okay, you know, let's talk about time. And you know, okay, you can't go on a holiday, a skiing holiday in the spring because we're lambing or whatever. You know, have those sort of conversations. But it's also for mum and dad to say, great, you're back now. We can take more time off. And so it's talking about time off, which is really quite important. You know, I'm quite sad. I read quite a lot about how the brain works. You know, and it's actually scientifically proven we have to take time off. Now there's a generation, an older generation, much older than the people here, who think that if you don't work 24/7, you are not a good farmer. You know, what the hell do you want to holiday anyway, you know? And so it's important now that people take time off. And so talking about that, making sure that everybody has time off is important. So that's the first thing to start talking about. Second thing then is housing. This young person coming back into the business, where are they going to live? They may have a spouse or a partner or something like that when they come back. I would suggest, after almost 14 years now, you don't live within sight of mum and dad. Okay? Because, now for some people it works fine. Okay? Works fine. But be very careful. My God, I have seen some huge problems where people have lived too close together. And there isn't enough privacy, you know. I remember going to Ireland. I travelled all over the UK and Ireland, and I remember going to Ireland a few years ago. And there was a daughter-in-law there, you know, and she just married into the family a few months. And what had happened was, the eldest son there was going to inherit the farm. He was going to run the farm. He was back already working there. And so they had the farmhouse, and then at right angles to it was an old stone building. We'll convert the stone building. Now the stone building only had a little gate in between it. It was at right angles so they could see into each other's house, right? And so Dad and Mum said, we'll convert the barn and you can move into the farmhouse. So they converted the barn, you know. Mother-in-law chose the kitchen and she chose the bathroom and all that sort of stuff. When it came to it, Dad wouldn't move out of the farmhouse. So the daughter-in-law had to move into the barn conversion where she hadn't chosen the kitchen and she hadn't chosen the bathroom, so that wasn't great. And then in the meeting, the daughter-in-law said to me, she said, my father-in-law, when he wants my husband, he doesn't come and knock on the door. He walks around the house looking through all the windows to see if he can see it. And it was driving her up the wall, you know. And they were quarrelling about where they parked the cars, who had which bit of the garden, who's using the washing, all that sort of stuff. And so it's really important to think about these things. And you know, I have gone into where they have families where there have been serious problems because people have been too close together. And it's resulted in divorce and mental health issues as well. And so be very careful to make sure that people don't live too close together. Okay? But a spouse or a partner coming back who's not used to farming. I had the comment once of one young woman who said, I feel like I'm living in a bloody commune. So it's very careful, be very careful about people living too close together. The other thing then, the next area then, the housing out, there's privacy, and sometimes you have to say things like, okay, you know, after a certain time at night, people are not available for the farm work unless it's something urgent. Because you have sometimes the older generation saying, you know, I know it's 8 o'clock, but there's a water tank out in the field or something like that. And, you know, the younger generation saying, hang on, this is my time with my children and all that. So you have to put barriers in to make sure that people have time off and, you know, and it doesn't create conflicts within families, because it does. It does, believe me. The other area then to sort out when you've got a young person coming back into the business is how they're going to be paid. You know, are they going straight into a farm partnership? If so, you need to be talking about how that's going to happen, and you need proper legal advice on that. And or are they going to be paid? And talking about partnerships, you know, you've got Linda here today as well, but I would strongly advise people to look. If you think you're in a partnership, make sure you have a partnership agreement. Because I've come across so many families who say, yeah, I'm in a partnership, it's to do with tax, but they haven't actually signed a partnership agreement. And I'll give you an example. Is somebody who was near me, they didn't actually deal with me, but they were family in my area. There was a mum and dad and son and daughter-in-law in a partnership together. They were partnership as far, the name of the partnership on the checkbook and all that. They had never signed a partnership agreement. They fell out, and mother and father-in-law sold the farm out from son and daughter-in-law, and they could do it because there was no partnership agreement. You'd be very careful. Make sure whenever you do things, you get proper advice, because, okay, you've got to pay for it, but having said that, it could cost, the cost of it is far, far smaller than the outcome if you don't do things properly. So that's, young person coming back, people say, well, look, we're going to see how this works out. The young person says, I'm not sure if I want to stay back here. And the parents say, well, we're not sure if, you're going to work out here. So maybe there's a time for sort of saying, right, okay, let's have a bit of time to see how we settle in. But you still have to work out how you're going to pay them. And in a lot of businesses, in all fairness, we can't pay them what they're worth. But I think it is very important for the young person's self-esteem that they are acknowledged for how much they are worth. Or Edinburgh or something like that, need to realise that brother or sister who's coming back to the family farm is taking a cut in wages to be working there. So that's an understanding, and it needs to be, and so also for the self-esteem of that young person. Okay, you're 25,000 a year, 30, whatever, but we can't pay you that. So there's a way of doing this as well. I'm thinking about this. So let's take an example. We just use any old figure. Got a young person coming back into the business, and if they were working for somebody else, they would be, they'd be worth 25,000 a year. Okay, just say 25,000. They come back to the family farm and say, well, actually, we can't pay you that. We'll pay you 15. Okay, so there's a £10,000 shortfall there. What do you do about that? Well, first of all, one of the things I would suggest is you keep a record of it. Because there may be, and I've often come, 20 years down the line, where there may be a challenge coming through from brothers and sisters saying, hang on, we want some share in this now. And the business owes that person a sum of money. Well, if you keep a record of it, you know exactly how much that person has been owed, You've got to be careful about tax implications, and not telling people and all that sort of stuff. But it's very important to do that, because then you have a paper that says, right, okay, in 20 years' time, this business owes that person, because this is how much they were underpaid. So that's one thing you may need to think about. Not for everybody, but you may need to think about. The other, in that same example then, you're paying them 15, they're worth 25. You have to take into account what they get as perks that they wouldn't get if they worked for somebody else. So, and there's usually things, it's the use of a phone, it's the use of a vehicle, it's the diesel tank on the yard, that type of thing. Put a figure on it. Because it's real, if they were working for somebody else, they would have to pay for those. And you've got brothers and sisters who are non-farming saying, well, it's all right for him or her. They keep a record of that, possibly. The other idea you might do is it might be a way of that business. So you could say, right, okay, that £5,000 worth means if you're in a company structure, they're buying £5,000 worth of shares in the business, or they're buying £5,000 worth of livestock. It's their way of buying into the business, because that's unofficially how it's. Is that people aren't paid enough because in the expectation they're going to get the farm in the future. And so maybe doing that sort of thing, but you can't do it without getting proper advice first, you know, from solicitors, from accountants. But it may be something you need to be thinking about, because there are, you know, challenges of people who are off farm, sort of saying, well, it's all right for them, you know, they're getting a farm as a gift. But if you can sort of pay out brothers and sisters at an early stage, that's a good idea, because then you've got the person who's running the farm not having this thing hanging over them that one day I'm going to have to pay out my brothers and sisters. Possibly I don't know how much it's going to be, and I don't know when it's going to happen, you know? And so if you can sort of sort that out at an early stage, it works very well. Now, not everybody can do this, but some people do. I've got a neighbour that I've dealt with near me who is the son, and he's got 3 sisters, and what they've done is they're a very successful business, and so he's getting the farm. What they've done is paid out the 3 girls. They paid deposits on houses. They're working in Cardiff and London and places like that. They've given them deposits on houses and that type of thing. Be careful about that, or they don't come back for more afterwards, you know, so it has to be all legally sorted out. But it is a possibility, you know. I mean, some people can't do it, some people can. But that may be a good idea for some people, because I remember going into one family years ago. There was a son and the daughter was going to get a share of the farm. And the son said, well, I'm not growing this business, because the bigger I grow this business, the more I have to give my sister. Now, that's a disaster as far as you know, that's not good business policy at all. So maybe looking at that. The other area then you can do in that area is you could say, right, okay, along the line, once this business is now being run by this young person, you know, a lot of it being done by the young person, maybe you bought the next door farm because this young person is there, you wouldn't have done it. There should maybe be a line drawn in the sand. It's quite difficult to do, but the legal profession can sort it out. Line drawn in the sand and said, right, okay, from now on, any growth in this business is down to that young person's efforts and shouldn't be shared with siblings. Okay, so something can be done, you know, if you can't share it out at an early stage, because again, it's very demotivating for some. The one thing you have to remember, though, is you don't have to be equitable to be fair. A lot of people have this thing about, well, the farm is worth 2 million and one of them's getting 2 million. I've got 2 other kids, they're going to have 2 million each as well. That's ridiculous. You know, you can't do that. We all know that farmland is only worth that if you sell it. You know, and the earning capacity of the farmland bears no resemblance to its value. And so you don't have to be equitable to be fair. It's helping people to understand what that means. And that's why this family meeting is very important. You have all the family there, including the ones who are not going to farm, because it's important for them to understand that if for them an equal share, that farm will have to be sold. And that's what happens in a lot of family meetings. I get, you know, kids who are out working in other cities or whatever, doing other jobs. And it's amazing how they forget about things, you know, and forget about the farm. And they're sort of sitting there thinking, oh, great, farm's worth 2 million quid, you know, and you have a share of this. And then we put up the account, you know, and there's a £400,000 loan on this. They didn't know about that for a start. And then, you know, when they realise that to have an equal share, the whole farm would have to be sold, and then they'd have to share the money out. I have never had what I call an off-farm child say they would force the sale of a farm just to have an equal share. But it's including them, because if you do not include those brothers and sisters in the discussions, they will think something's being done behind their back, and that's when they kick up. You know, that's when they kick up a fuss. So including everybody in the farm discussions is very, very important. Okay? And you know, some people get to know what's happening and all that. Big mistake, because they need to understand what's happening. So they need to understand, you know, what the implications are of what is happening. And in a way, You present the problem to them, you know, you say, well, this is the problem, you know, we've got a farm, it's worth that much, but we've got a big loan on it, and this person wants to farm and they want to carry on the business, and, you know, that's the problem, and then they're part of the solution, because they have to come up with that solution. Well, they'll say, you know, and they usually say, well, as long as I have something, as long as I'm acknowledged in this family, that's fine. And it does. It's amazing, actually, it is amazing how it works. But you have to include them in the discussion, it's very important. Okay, the other thing about young people coming back, very important. Young people want responsibility. They want to be in charge. But sadly, in a lot of businesses, they go home and they're not given responsibility. They don't understand what the business is doing. They never have a look at the farm accounts. They've never gone to visit the accountant. And that is, you know, and then if you expect them to then become a partner of a business they don't really understand, well, is that fair? And so it's really important that young people are given responsibility at an early age. In New Zealand, they say the young people should have the checkbook by the time they're 30. Now, some people would faint at that. There are people out there, I know I've gone on to farms where granddad is well in his 80s, and he still is the only young person. When they come back into the business, they give them proper responsibility. An example would be, as I'm a dairy farmer, young person comes back, you're running a dairy farm, right, okay, this young person is now in charge of the young stock. You're given a calf at 24 hours old, it's had its colostrum, it's tagged and all that sort of stuff. I want that animal back in the herd calving at 2 years old. Go away and do it. Okay, we don't want you to spend too much money, so here's your budget. And we want to make sure that animal is on track, so we're going to be weighing it every so often. But it's up to them then to decide how that animal is going to be reared. So it's real responsibility. Not, well, this is how you do it, because this is the way Grandad did it, and, you know, and that sort of thing, and sitting on their shoulder all the time. It has to be real responsibility for people, because, you know, that's what they want. That's what they want. It's so sad. I get so many young people phoning me up, and they're so frustrated. So frustrated because they said, I've come back to the family farm, and they said, yeah, I'd be part of the business and all that, and all I'm doing is basically shoveling shit, basically, because I don't understand what's going on, and nobody's including me in this. And, you know, it's not just young people, it's people in their 50s who still, you know, I did a meeting in Scotland, actually, where there was a father in his 70s, and son was 49. He had mental health issues because dad kept saying to him, yeah, you're responsible for the business. Yeah, of course you are. Yeah, and he'd been telling everybody, you know, it's all sorted out, you know. Yeah, my son is responsible for the business. So the son said, okay, we're going to change the breed of cattle then. Oh, you can't do that. That's not real responsibility, is it? And so, you know, that's very important, really important for young people. Okay, the big thing then, you know, if I'm asked what is the biggest problem with succession and the problems that arise from that, it is lack of proper communication. Some families talk really well together, others don't, and all points in between, you know. And but it is important to take time out to speak and to talk to each other. It's not good enough to have breakfast together, unless there's a proper meeting. It's not good enough to be shouting at each other across the yard. You have to take time out to have proper business meetings. Now, it's almost invariable that when I do a family meeting, on the action plan, we have an action plan that the family have done themselves. It's not my action plan, it's the family's action plan. On that will be, first, visit the solicitor, these are the questions you need to ask, visit the accountant, these are the questions you need to ask, and then have proper business meetings. When you take time out to sit down and talk about things, so that if there's something building up in somebody's mind and really annoying them, they know they have the opportunity to sit down and talk about it in a proper, reasonable manner, rather than to pick their moment in between silage and lambing and, you know, God knows what else as well. And so, a lot of families say, right, and a lot of families say to me, that was the best thing that came out of the meeting, was that we sit down and have proper business meeting. So you have a meeting once a month, once a fortnight, once a week if you want to. Have a start time, say which day it's going to be on, have a start time and an end time. So you know how long it's going to take. So people say, oh, I haven't got time this week. If it's only half an hour, or, time. Some people have the family meeting, the family business meeting for half an hour, and then for the last 10 minutes, the staff come in. So the staff are included then to know what's going on. But it's incredibly important, and you have actions coming out of that. So, you can either write it down, you can put it on WhatsApp or something like that. This is what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. Who's going to do it, and all those type of things. So you don't have the thing, well, you said you were going to do that. No, you said you were going to do it. So you have proper business meetings. Really important. You're running big businesses, some of you. And if you're thinking of agritourism and other businesses as well, you really need to be sitting down and having a handle on what the business is doing. So regular, what I call operational meetings, but some of our families then have, say, 3 or 4 times a year, a strategic meeting, which is then looking at the bigger picture. And you may have your consultant or whatever in that meeting as well, where you're looking, right, okay, this isn't, which field are we going to graze next week and when we're going to do whatever. This is, are we in the right business? Are we in the right mix of enterprises? Do we need changing anything? So it's a strategic meeting, and that's quite important. And some people even have an annual meeting as well, where they have the bank manager there, they have the accountant there as well, and they're saying, right, okay, review past year, what are the things we're concentrating on next year. So communication is key, because as I said earlier, if you do it and you're running a business on assumptions, then you have conflict. And so it's really important that everybody is clear about things. So those business meetings are really important. If you don't get anything else out of today, I'm sure you'll get lots. But sitting down and talking.